Very good afternoon, all of you. So I believe whatever we have discussed yesterday, you got a little bit deeper understanding regarding what anthropology is, what is its scope, what is its history and development, right? And after that, we have discussed one or two important comments by famous anthropologists. One of them was the comment by R. Merritt, who says that anthropology is the child of Darwinism. Then we went on to discuss Kathleen Gogg's comment that anthropology is a child of imperialism, and then there was last comment that was given by Levi Strauss that we have discussed yesterday. Anthropology is the child of revolt and rebellion, right? So you can expect a question on historical development, or you can say how anthropology as a discipline have evolved. You can expect a question on these statements made by famous anthropologists. You can expect a question on the scope of anthropology, but since you have studied anthropology as a whole now, right, and you know that anthropology is a holistic, integrated, comparative, historical, universal study of men over space and time, right. Now there is a very pertinent question that may arise in most of your mind, is that whether anthropology is a natural science or it is a social science, right. So basically, and this is the most common doubt in the minds of most of the aspirants, that whether this is a natural science, or you can say, many people say that this is like biology, right, this is like science, and some people think that it is similar to social sciences or humanities के जैसा है, right? Although there is a difference between what we say humanities and social sciences. So what is it like? Where will we place anthropology? If suppose there is a question whether anthropology is a natural science or social science, what is the place of anthropology within this distinction, right? So this is a very famous debate in anthropological circles, right? Some say that it is closer to natural sciences, some say no, it is closer to social sciences. Now just think on this particular topic. We study human evolution, biological evolution. We study race, right? That means differences on the basis of morphological features. Morphological means these physical features, visible features that you can see and observe by your eyes, right? We study some portion of genetics, right? Chromosomes, genes, etc. We study disease, right? We study adaptations to different types of climates, right? We study human growth and development. So all these things, these aspects of humankind, when anthropology is studying, it is closer to natural sciences, right? And when anthropology is studying the various social institutions like family, marriage, right? When it is studying marriage, economic organization, political organization, right? So it is closer to social sciences. When it is studying beliefs, folk tales, myths, right? You can say literature, cinema, then it is closer to humanities, right? So now again, This is very simplistic to say, right? Suppose if I ask you, where will you place socio-cultural anthropology? Whether socio-cultural anthropology is a science or social science. This is another point of debate here. Now, generally we can distinguish when anthropology is studying the biological aspect, then naturally it is closer to the biological sciences, or you can say natural sciences. When it is studying the social aspects and these aspects, then it is closer to social sciences. That is true. But what about this socio-cultural anthropology, right? Whether socio-cultural anthropology, because it is a sub-branch of anthropology, it is one of the major specialization in anthropology. What would you call? This is a science or it is a social science? Now, how will you address this question? Now, first of all, you must understand what is science, right? If you know that what is science, then you can better understand this and you can come closer to what I am trying to say. So, science, it means knowledge, right, which can be observed, which can be verified, which can be justified with a proof, okay, which can be rectified with the new evidences. That is a science, right? So, whether you can objectively analyze the beliefs, folk tales, whether you can say with objectivity how human behavior will turn out. So, objectivity, it is not that possible in this area, right? Then how you can say that anthropology or socio-cultural anthropology is a science, right? If you can come closer to that objectivity, number one thing, if you can come closer to that objectivity by any means, then you can say that it is a science, right? Science generalize things, right? It is nomothetic. Nomothetic means a tendency to generalize, to make theories. So let me tell you here that how you can say it is science, anthropology or socio-cultural anthropology for that matter can be termed as science. So see, what anthropologists do? Anthropologists study variety of societies, cultures, say culture 1, culture 2, culture 3. Anthropologists will study all these cultures, and on the basis of these cultures, their similarities and differences, they can give a law, right? Generalize things that something is present here. Say you can take an example that marriage as an institution is found here, marriage is found here, and marriage is found here. It may vary in its institutional framework, but it is present in all the three cultures. So it is a universal phenomena. This may be a theory, right? So this generalizing phenomena within anthropology make it closer to science, right? Now, not only this, the way anthropology collects data, the way anthropology studies humans, human groups, populations, that is another way to look at anthropology, whether it is science or it is not science. I will summarize everything, do not worry about it, right? So second thing is how you can think that the way anthropologists collect data, they go to the field, right, and make observations directly through their own senses, right? And this observation in the field work process, field work means, see, where science create knowledge in the laboratory, right? And what is the laboratory of an anthropologist? It is the field, it is the community which is to be studied. So anthropologist field is that community, that field, right? According to Herkovitz that we have studied yesterday, Herkovitz says that field or that community which is to be studied is the laboratory for the anthropologists. Anthropologists go there, objectively perceive the information by staying with the people and collect that data as objectively as possible. Right, that objectivity in data collection brings it closer to the natural sciences, right? This brings it closer to the natural sciences. So basically what I was saying, whether anthropology is a natural science or it's a social science, this is a debate. Now let us summarize everything that we have just discussed. If you have to address this question, you have to write first in introduction that anthropology is a unique blend. It's a unique blend or amalgamation of natural sciences, social sciences and humanities. Right? It's a unique blend of natural sciences, social sciences and humanities. Right? When anthropology is studying the biological aspect of mankind, then it is closer to the natural sciences. You give all the examples of the biological aspect that we have just discussed, right? And when it is studying the social aspect, the cultural aspect of the mankind, then it is closer to the social sciences and humanities, right? So the second thing is, when it is studying the socio-cultural aspect, then it is closer to social sciences, or you can say humanities, right? Suppose, now next thing you will say, when anthropologists are focusing on a particular culture, that means contextual study, contextual or culture specific study, right? When anthropologists are studying the culture in narrow sense, right? Or you can say culture specific studies, then anthropology is closer to social science, because they are focusing only on a particular culture, only on one culture. But when anthropologists are focusing or they are studying on multiple cultures at the same time, and they are trying to generalize, right? When they are trying to generalize, then it is closer to natural sciences. So when anthropologists are studying in a particular context, एक चीज के ऊपर, and they are doing descriptive study here, then this descriptive, this ideographic study brings it closer to the social sciences. But when they are comparing, 2 to 3 cultures with an aim to generalize, then it is closer to natural sciences, right? Then next you can say the objectivity in the data collection, through field work, face to face participant observation, further brings anthropology closer to the natural sciences. Now, what various anthropologists, famous scholars of anthropology, has to say about this debate, right? So in this debate, many anthropologists have participated, right? And the first among them I want to quote is Malinowski. Malinowski is the father of field work in anthropology, right? Because he truly enriched anthropology through his field work approach, right? So what Malinowski has to say? Malinowski says that anthropology stands in between the two. Anthropology is in between the two. ना ही ये completely natural science है, ना ही ये completely social science है, brother, it is in between the two, right? Although his holism, his approach to field work is the most scientific one, but still he considers it is in between the two. That means ये दोनों के बीच में lie करता है. If there is science here, right, and if there is social science here, then here is anthropology, according to Malinowski, right? Then, after Malinowski, his contemporary, Professor Radcliffe Brown, he says that anthropology is similar to natural sciences, right? Anthropology is similar to natural sciences or science. It is a natural science according to him. How? Because it has a tendency to universalize. Because it has a tendency to universalize. What does that mean? What does that mean, universalize? See, I gave you an example, culture 1, culture 2, culture 3. And if you are observing anything in all the cultures, then you can universalize, you can give a theory, you can generalize, right? So it has a tendency to universalize and generalize. You can see the same statement in other contexts, right? That it is not focusing on a particular local culture. Rather, it is dealing with the whole entire humankind. So if it is applicable to the entire humankind, then it is closer to natural science, right? So it is not specific in context, rather it is general. It has a tendency to generalize and universalize. That is why it is closer to natural science, or it is natural science. So here one is saying that it is in between the two, here it is saying no, it is a natural science, right? After Brown, many scholars, right, like Alfred Kroeber, who was a student of French Boas, Alfred Kroeber, Evans Pritchard. Yesterday we have heard few of these names. Keep on noting these names down. Evans Pritchard, then Ruth Benedict, Evans Pritchard was the student of Radcliffe Brown. Alfred Kroeber was the student of Frank Boas. Ruth Benedict was the first female student of Frank Boas, right? They say that anthropology is historical in its approach. Anthropology is historical in its approach, and thereby it is closer to social sciences. It is closer to social sciences. Now, not only this, Evans Pritchard says that anthropology is historiography. Anthropology is historiography, right? That means it is closer to पानी और दे दो ग्लास देना. Okay, so it is historiography, and so it is closer to the social sciences. Not only this, after these scholars, these contradicting views, right, there was another very important scholar from United States of America, USA, right, from the Chicago School, Chicago University, Robert Redfield. Robert Redfield says he is also the father of civilizational school in anthropology, right? He says that the holistic tendencies are on rise. The holistic tendencies are on rise in anthropology. So you can say it is a whole. It is whole. When it is dealing with whole, then it is, you can say, it is closer to sciences, right? So thank you. So that was the argument given by Robert Redfield. Now finally, after Redfield, you can conclude with Eric Wolf. Eric Wolf says that this, you can use Eric Wolf in the conclusion. He says that it is the most humanistic of all social sciences and most scientific of all sciences, right? So this is a statement that you can use in the conclusion. Now, I believe that you got a decent understanding whether it is a science or a social science. You can say finally that it is in between the two, right? And it is a unique blend of the two, right? Because it, it merges both in such a unique way that it has the elements of both, right? When it is studying a particular culture, a particular social institution, then it is a social science, and when it is dealing with various cultures, then it is a natural science. You can simply understand that, right? After that, the next heading, next topic that I wanted to take, in today's session also you will get an assignment, right? There will be practice questions just as yesterday's class, and I would request all of you to try to practice from the very beginning, because the more you practice, the closer you will be to your goal, right? Because we grow, we evolve on a daily basis, right? हर मिनट, हर घंटा, हर दिन हम कुछ सीखते हैं. Don't leave the learning for next 3 months. कि एक बार syllabus खत्म हो जाता है, then we will start writing intensively, right? वो 3 महीने खत्म होने में preparation खत्म हो जाती है लोगों की. Okay. So next is what is unique about anthropology, or what makes anthropology a unique discipline? What makes anthropology a unique discipline? A unique discipline. This is a question, and yesterday we have discussed also this thing, right? We have discussed about the definitions, we have discussed about its scope, we have discussed about its history and development. So let me tell you that what makes anthropology a unique, right? You know that anthropology studies men, right? You can say human to be more neutral, right? So it studies human. So does sociology, right? So does political science. So does biology or genetics, you can say. So does other subjects, economics, right? Everybody study, every these uh, disciplines studies human. Even psychology studies human behavior. Anthropology also studies human behavior, right? So what is this unique about anthropology? What is unique about anthropology? See, when we talk about sociology, sociology studies humans but from the social point of view, right? Then political science studies from the political point of view, human rights, democracy and other things, justice, right? Biology studies the biological aspect. It studies human beings as an animal, right? Psychology studies the behavior of an individual, right? Individual behavior, right? किसी को सेजोफ्रेनिया है कि नहीं है, किसी को कोई behavioral issue तो नहीं है, that comes under psychology. So you can say all these disciplines, these subjects, they also studies man, human, but they study in part manner, right? Their approach is, right? They are studies, right? They are studying a single part. They are not looking at men or human as a whole, because we humans have multiple aspects. But these disciplines are not dealing with the whole, right? And this perspective, this one perspective distinguishes, and it makes anthropology a unique discipline, right? This is one and the most fundamental perspective that makes anthropology a unique discipline. Okay. So what I have just told you, there are other disciplines that too study humans, but anthropology study humans as a whole, right? As a whole, and so it is a holistic study of the mankind. It is the holistic study of the mankind. That makes anthropology unique, right? So I just told you that this is one perspective that makes anthropology a unique discipline, distinguished from other disciplines and other areas of knowledge, right? So this is the first perspective that makes anthropology unique, and that you can call the holism, holistic approach, right? होता क्या है, ऐसे समझते हैं. Just take the example of a man who is covering his eyes, right? And you take that man to an elephant, right? Ask him to touch and tell what it is, right? So when he hold the tail, he will say something like snake. When he hold something like his legs, the legs of elephant, he may say that it is the tree's trunk, right? And so forth. So basically, the man with the covered eyes may not get the whole picture of the elephant, right? Whatever he touches, he will tell you that. And that is what other disciplines do, right? When they study the social aspect, they will tell that this is the entirety. But anthropology says no. The social aspect is not different from the biological aspect or the linguistic aspect. This social aspect has a past. It is not different from the political aspect, it is not different from the economic aspect, right, or the cultural aspect, or our myths and legends, folk tales, music, everything is integrated. So that is where anthropology stands out, right. So this is the first perspective, that is the holistic perspective that makes anthropology a unique discipline, right. That means anthropology study humans past, present, future, right. It studies social, economic, political, biological, right, linguistic and all aspects of the mankind as a whole at one point in time. Second, what makes anthropology unique? What is the second perspective that makes it unique? That it is comparative study. It is comparative study. Now, comparative study means that it compares two or more societies, two or more cultures to generalize on human behavior, right? To make generalizations, theories on human behavior. That makes it unique. This comparative approach, this comparative perspective makes it unique, right? This comparative study in anthropology, we call it ethnology. I will deal with this term, right? So what is ethnology? Basically social anthropology, that you will understand in just few minutes when we will shift to the branches of anthropology. So ethnos means people and logos means scientific study, right? So ethnology is the comparative study of two or more cultures, right? So this is with the aim to make generalizations or theories about the human behavior. Okay. Next, what approach makes it unique is its historical nature, right? Historical nature. See, its historical perspective, right? It inquires into the history of cultures with recorded history. The cultures which do not have a recorded history, history cannot study that. There, anthropology comes to the rescue and it studies those cultures, how people have migrated from one place to the other, how one cultural element have migrated from one place to the other, right? How we are wearing these kind of shirts, clothes, the technology that we use, it might have come from somewhere. You know that industrial revolution happened somewhere else and the industrial products that we are using here, this technology we have borrowed from somewhere, although some of it we have invented and we gave to some others also, right? So this diffusion of traits, right, in the past when there was no recorded history, that study is done by the anthropology, this historical approach, right? And anthropology studies a culture on the basis of its own unique history. It tells about the migration routes. It tells about how and when that culture was originated, right? How and when that culture was changed, what were the factors responsible for that change. So this approach makes it unique. Next, anthropology studies society and culture in synchronic and diachronic manner. In synchronic and diachronic manner, right? Or you can say this perspective makes it unique. Now what these terms tries to say? Synchronic. Syn means at the same time, chron is the unit of time. So synchronic means at present. Whatever is happening now comes under synchronic. Diachronic means in past, right? So anthropology studies present as well as past, right? Some scholars argue, like Malinowski, Radcliffe Brown, they say that anthropology studies humans and human cultures in an objective and scientific manner. Radcliffe Brown and Branislaw Malinowski says that anthropology studies humans and human cultures in objective and scientific manner, and that objectivity comes from the scientific collection of data, first hand collection of data by anthropologists through field work and participant observation, right? Field work, you understand that anthropologists go to the field and study the people. Participant observation means participating with the people in their community life and at the same time observing them, staying with them, learning their language, eating their food, and at the same time studying them. That is participant observation. So through that participant observation, most scientific data can be collected. So Radcliffe Brown and Malinowski says that if we cannot go back in time, we cannot go back in time, we do not have a time machine, and if we cannot go back in time, then you cannot collect scientific data, right? You cannot collect scientific data, so you must focus on synchronic studies. At the same time, there were others like Frank Boas and Evans Pritchard, Alfred Kroeber. They say that without understanding the history of a particular culture, you cannot understand the dynamics of culture. You cannot understand how that culture underwent change, or from where the cultural traits have emerged, how people have migrated, right? So there are both of these perspectives at the same time in anthropology. So that makes it unique, right? Then next perspective is that anthropology studies the emic perspective as well as etic perspective, right? Emic perspective and etic perspective, these two terms, they came from phonemic linguistics से आए हैं and phonetic, right? Phonemic basically phoneme से आया है. Phoneme is any word which have a meaning in a context, right? And it is just a sound, right? It is not associated with any context. Hello is a sound, right? And hello here in phonemic, it has a context that we are greeting, right? So let me tell you now here what we are dealing with. Emic has the insider's view, right? What I understood through the word hello, right? So it is the native's point of view, right? The inhabitant's point of view. The way we have communicated just now, it is our point of view. The way you understand whatever I speak is emic perspective, right? Basically, how people see their world, right? We have almost a similar mode of living, so whatever I am trying to convey, you are understanding that, right? So, emic perspective is the perspective of the tribal people, how they see their world, how they feel about the trees, the forests, the animal life, the water, about the nature as a whole, right? Their perspective about their own culture, about their own music, about their own language, about their own economy, about their own political system is their own beliefs. So that is amic perspective. Etic perspective is the perspective of outsiders, right? You may see the tribal people practice shifting agriculture, right? And you say that they are destroying the environment, they are causing harm to the environment through these shifting agriculture, right? So that is your perspective, right, about them. But these people are practicing that shifting agriculture for thousands of years and no environment was lost at that time. It is due to the population pressure and the pressure of the development that is causing the loss. So don't go into that debate. That is a different debate. What I am trying to make a point here, that amic perspective is the perspective of the native, how they feel about their world, right? And etic perspective is what we feel, outsiders see to those people, right? So amic and etic perspective, anthropology studies through both of these perspectives, right? Etic is a little bit more scientific according to Marvin Harris as compared to the amic, because people may lie about their own culture or they brood about their own culture. They say that my culture is the best, right? Next perspective that makes anthropology unique is the objectivity, that anthropology studies humans in as objective as it's possible, right? It is not based on imaginations, it is not based on any conjectures or any preconceived notions, right? Rather, it is based on the objective data, right? It is based on the objectivity. Scientific nature comes with the objectivity in the data collection, right? Next point that makes anthropology unique is the philosophy of cultural relativism. The philosophy of cultural relativism. Now, what is cultural relativism? Cultural relativism is a philosophy in anthropology. It's a kind of theory also. It's an approach also, right? And what is it? See, suppose you do not eat beef. You do not practice cousin marriage, right? Or you do not practice head hunting for sake. Or you can say that you don't practice cannibalism, right? You don't eat raw meat, you don't drink alcohol. All these things you do not do. But others do some of these things. Others eat beef. Others may practice cousin marriage. So how will you see them? You will find, some of you may find that it is wrong, right? And it is bad, it is immoral, right? And if you see in that way, that is your ethnocentric opinion. That is your biased opinion, because you are biased through your own cultural learnings. You are not looking at that person or that group or that community in an objective way. You are just trying to see that those people are wrong, right? Or you see them as inferior than your own cultural beliefs, right? The four examples I gave you, one was cannibalism and head hunting. That I will come separately on that, but I want to say that cultural relativism sees other cultures from their own context, right? Cultural relativism do not judge other cultures from the lens of my own culture or your own culture, right? It says that all cultures are equal and they are equally valid. They are product of their own unique history. This concept of cultural relativism was first propounded by Franz Boas, Papa Boas, an American, German-born American anthropologist, right? He says that we should not judge other cultures from our own bias, right? Because all cultures are equally valid. And if we see other cultures as equally valid, without our bias, we will try to see them more objectively, right? So this philosophy, this approach makes it anthropology more objective, more scientific, right? Now, the other examples that I gave you, that head hunting, is it valid? Because I just said that cultural relativism says that all cultures and their practices are equally valid. So, do you say that this head hunting is valid? Do you say that cannibalism is valid? Do you say that female genital mutilation by some communities of Africa and one community in India also is valid? Do you think that sati pratha, the burning of wife on the husband's pyre, is valid? Right. So just think about them. These are the criticisms to cultural relativism. Whenever we come to this topic separately, we will discuss that. Right. I just wanted to make you a little bit, I just want to open that dimension in your mind. Next perspective which makes anthropology unique is its field work through participant observation. Right? Field work, participant observation. See, anthropology's theories and generalizations are based, anthropological theories and generalizations are based on participant observation, field work, right? See, you know that census or NFHS data, you may have heard, right? Census officers comes to your home and collect various type of information, National Family Health Survey, right? Or other economic census and all, household census, right? All these, exercises, they also collect data, right? And many of the disciplines like economics, right? Like political science, like sociology, these disciplines uses these data to make generalizations or to make some theories. So they are basing their theories or their approaches, their methodologies on the basis of these secondary sources of data. But anthropologists directly go to the field. And collect data from his or her own senses, right? So this is through the participant observation. Right? So these 8 perspectives make anthropology unique. These 8 perspectives make anthropology a unique discipline. Okay. Now, after that, I believe you got this, what I was trying to convey, right? What is unique about anthropology? And this can be a question also. Next, after this, let us come to the topic that we have chosen for today, right? And we chose the branches of anthropology for today, right? Branches of anthropology, or you can say major specializations within anthropology, right? See, although there are multiple branches that may emerge out of anthropology, right? Whatever discipline you see, it has some or the other relationship with anthropology. Why? Because anything that you study, it has something to do with us, and anthropology studies us in a holistic manner. So anyhow, other disciplines, whether you take cinema, you take literature, you take sociology, you take economics, political science, medical science, even geography, geology, environmental science, all of these have something, it has something to do with us. And if it has something to do with us, then it can make a blended branch of anthropology. But we will stick here to the major specializations in anthropology, right? A very famous American anthropologist, Frank Boas, Papa Boas, father of American anthropology, he subdivided anthropology into 4 major specializations, right? And these 4 major specializations, according to him, is the physical anthropology, right? He used the term cultural anthropology, but we will say socio-cultural anthropology, because now it is socio-cultural anthropology, right? And biological anthropology or physical anthropology we have done, and linguistic anthropology, and fourth one, according to him, was archaeological anthropology. These were the 4 branches, 4 major sub-branches or specializations of anthropology according to Frank Boas, right? But we cannot stick to these 4 only, right? Because there is another major branch, right? Application of all these 4, or you can say applied anthropology. Yesterday we have discussed about these 4 in a very short, brief manner, but today we will deal about them in an elaborate way, right? Because you can expect a specific question, a direct question on any of these. You can be asked to write a short note on these, and that is why you will find in today's lecture there is an assignment in which I have asked 2 questions on the basis of these, right? You may find today 3. So if a question specifically come on these major branches, how will you address that? My purpose in those 2 questions is that, right? I gave you an elaborate structure and content, the way you have to address, right? Some of you may know, even the people who have written UPSC, who have qualified with it, they may not be as comfortable to write a short note on these topics because they have not think in that manner, right? They do not have the information structured in a way which is to be presented to the examiner, right? So that is my purpose of doing that. Please do download those, right? It will be useful for you. So these are the 4 branches as suggested by Frank Boas, and the 5th one is the application of them, right? See, if any discipline, any subject do not have relevance, right? If it does not have relevance, then it will lose its utility. कोई फायदा नहीं है उसको पढ़ने का, right? Some of you may think that maths पढ़ने का क्या फायदा है, right? But the technological development that you see here, something is related to, वहाँ पे मैथ का बहुत कुछ लेना देना है. So same way, this theory, if suppose it is pure theory, then it will lose its utility, right? It will lose its utility, right? But we cannot do that, and that is where anthropology has a lot of significance. It has a relevance in our day-to-day lives, right? That I have told you yesterday a little bit about, but today we will elaborate on these things. So let us start with these branches, and we'll take the first branch, physical anthropology. The name physical anthropology, sometime you may hear the term biological anthropology. Are they same or different? Now, my purpose is to first of all tell you whether both of these are one and the same or are they different. Just try to think. Physical, this word came from the word physique, right? That means form, shape, appearance, you can say. The way you look at me, I am visible to you, that is my shape, my form, right? And the study of the physical aspect is physical anthropology. And biology, right? It includes my inner aspects, my anatomy, physiology, genetics, genes, inheritance, right? So you can understand the difference between the two branches, right? Both of these words are used interchangeably, right? But they are different. How they are different? The term which was used before World War II in the anthropological circles was this one. Later on, it was replaced by this one. This one is known as classical physical anthropology, and this is known as new physical anthropology, right? There was a significant contribution of one scholar, Sherwood Washburn, who led to this shift. So we will talk about this shift in physical anthropology and biological anthropology, but before moving into this general discussion, let us structure it. Let us talk one by one what physical anthropology is, or simply I am saying physical or biological anthropology is. The distinction we will make later. Okay. In our book that you will receive, right, in that definitions and all and whatever I talk to you will be available. So don't focus much on just scribbling down. Try to scribble whatever is necessary, right? And wherever required, I will give you the dictation. But till now, whatever I am saying, it is available in your book that will be provided to you. You will get it, all of you might, I think it might have been sent to you until now. If not, you will receive within 1 or 2 days. Okay, so the first branch is physical anthropology or biological anthropology, right? So physical anthropology, it studies biological evolution, inheritance, adaptability, variations, right, and other things. So basically physical anthropology studies, I am taking both of these words synonymously here. I am not differentiating as of now. It studies the biological aspect of man, human, physical or biological aspect in a holistic manner over time and space, right? It studies the biological aspect in a holistic manner, right? You can write all those words integrated and all, but you can limit it here in a holistic manner, right? Focus is biological aspect, and when you are writing this holistic manner, that means you are not leaving out other things. You are not leaving out other aspects, right? Because what kind of population you have, right, progeny you have, depends upon the marriage. किससे शादी करते हो? न्यूज़पेपर में ऐड देखते हो कि that which type of groom or bride is required, what is height and what is the skin color, right? So the skin color of the parents, their height, their build, that determine the progeny, right? So the biological features of the next generation is determined by the social laws. किससे शादी करना है? Preferences, right? So this biological aspect we are studying as a whole, right? What will be the gene pool of a population? Suppose there is strict endogamy. That means there is no marriage outside that particular community or a group, right? If there is cousin marriage, naturally the gene pool of that particular community will be different, right? So that social laws, they determine the biology, isn't it? So you have to think about it. That is what we are saying, that in a holistic manner, study of biological aspect. Now let us look at one or two definitions of physical anthropology. I will not go in much detail about each and everything. I'm just telling you a few about it. So the father of physical anthropology was Paul Broca, and what Paul Broca has to say about physical anthropology, he says that it is the natural history of genus Homo. It is the natural history of genus Homo. Natural history of genus Homo, right? Or he further goes on to say that it is a science whose objective is to study humanity as a whole, whose objective is to study humanity as a whole in relationship to the rest of the nature, right? Scientific study, science will study humanity objectively as a whole in relation to the rest of the nature, right? Rest of the nature. Okay. This is the definition given by Paul Broca, right? Humanity as a whole, that means all aspects of humanity and how we interact with nature. Let us try to understand that so that you can understand this whole. See, how will you make subsistence? From where our food come? From the natural resources, from the agriculture, forests, right? So the nature is determining our food resources, our economy, isn't it? Right? This forest grows, right? Sacred groves, you might have heard the term in GS, Sacred groves are some patches of forests, right, which are considered as sacred, right, or religiously significant. Some of the tribes or communities believe that their ancestral spirits, souls live in those forests, right? So nature के साथ वो ऐसे जुड़े हुए हैं. Their economy is rooted in that. Their religion is rooted in that. Their food is rooted in that. Right? Now, many of the judgments, right, or you can say फैसले सुनाए जाते हैं इस sacred grove के नीचे खड़ा करके, कौन criminal है, कौन guilty है या नहीं है. Okay, so their polity is also rooted in it. So basically what I am trying to say here, that it is studying humanity in relationship to the rest of the nature. किस तरह की diseases कहाँ पे होंगी वो भी हम यहाँ से देख सकते हैं. किस तरह का adaptation कैसा है. Okay, because suppose nature is desert, right? So in this desertic area, the kind of body physique we have will be separate or different from the kind that we have in polar regions, right? So these things you have to think here. I believe that would have given you much clarity. Next, after him, there is another definition that I wanted to tell you, is that of Harkovites, right? Harkovite says that the physical anthropologist studies, right, the matters like racial differences, inheritance of bodily traits, growth and development or decay of human organism, as well as influence of natural environment on men, right? So these are some of the arguments, or you can say some of the observations made by Harkovites about physical anthropologists. He says that physical anthropology studies racial differences, that means variations among the different group of people. They study the bodily traits, whether hairs are straight or curly, whether hairs are black, brown or blonde, whether eye color is blue or brown or black, whether skin color is light or dark, whether the height is short, medium or tall, right? All these bodily traits. Growth and development, how human body grows. Is it determined by the genetic blueprint or the environmental differences like the climate, nutrition, the condition of home, all these factors, right? And naturally the influence of natural environment on men, right? So these are the different definitions given, some of the definitions, but it may not be necessary because we have sufficient content. So these definitions may not be that necessary. Okay. Now, how does this physical anthropology started? What is its history? Right. Although not necessary, but physical anthropology is considered as the oldest branch, right, of anthropology. So let me tell you a little bit about it. Again, we'll start from Herodotus. Okay, since yesterday we have discussed everything in regard to anthropology, right? Today we are talking about physical, this, a sub branch of anthropology. So here also Herodotus, who is also the father of history, he says that, and he first of all, when he was traveling across the Mediterranean colonies, Greek colonies across the Mediterranean Sea, he observed and mentioned the differences in the skulls differences in the skull, right? कैसा skull है, skull का shape कैसा है between Persians and Egyptians. So he mentioned about them. This mention is biologically oriented, isn't it? Where do you study skull? Biology में पढ़ते हैं. So basically this is where you can say the discussion started from here. But he is not considered as the father of physical anthropology. That is Paul Broca, which comes quite late in 1824 to 1880, right? He was a French, you can say, anthropologist, French surgeon. Okay. So after him, Aristotle also mentioned something, right? What Aristotle says, Aristotle considered man as a social animal. Again, he used the term animal, so that shows that he is also talking about something, right? Biological. And so forth. There are many scholars who talked about this, but finally Paul Broca was a French surgeon, right? So a French surgeon, he basically founded this field, right? And he also started a training program for the anthropologists. He started the training program for anthropologists, and their focus, Paul Broca's focus, was basically on the differences in the cranial size, or you can say skull size, right? And other anthropometric measurements, and on the basis of that, he was classifying people into different races. Different races, right? Categorization or classification of people among different races was the actual goal at that time. Even before Paul Broca and in between Aristotle, there were many scholars who were working on different fields. Like one of the very important person is Edward Tyson. Edward Tyson was a primatologist. And what is primatology? Primatology is the scientific study of primates. And you know that we humans belong to this primate order. Scientific study of primates. Who are other primates? The apes, monkeys, they are also primates. So it is their study which started by Edward Tyson, right? And he started basically analyzing the anatomical differences between humans and apes. Humans and apes. You know that we humans are considered to be evolved from apes. So naturally there are anatomical similarities and there are differences, right? That will be a separate discussion when we will move on to the physical anthropology. So this is what we have to understand here, that he started making the difference between the anatomy, or you can say physical differences between humans and apes. After that there was another scholar, right? We are talking the scholars before Paul Broca who basically made him to think in that direction. There was Blumenbach, a German physician, right? Blumenbach. The purpose of telling separately is that even if you forget about these people, it will not make much difference to you, right? He was a German physician and he categorized different people into 5 races on the basis of cranial measurements, right? Cranial measurements ke basis pe. So you can just see here, what is the focus here? Focus is physical. We are talking about the history, the beginning and the development of this field. So the focus is on the physique, right? It is not on the internal understanding, physiology, genetics. Here it is focused on the different races, the classification or categorization of people in different races, right? After him, J.C. Pritchard also and other people. Now, basically what happened here after Blumenbach and these Herodotus, Aristotle and all, there was a debate, right? Because the racial study was the primary goal here, right? The study of races was the primary goal, right? Categorization of people was the primary goal. So people started debating whether these different races, some dark colored, some light colored, right? Some pale colored, are they evolved from a common species or they evolved from multiple species? So there was one theory, monogenic theory, which says that all humans, all races evolved from one species, right? Caucasoid, Mongoloid, Negroid, all evolved from a common species, but there are others, polygenic theory, that all races evolved from different species. This was the debate at that time in you can say 18th century, right? 18th century, this was a debate, right? English anthropologist, you can say, or English physician, J.C. Pritchard, he supported this theory, monogenic theory, and there was another group of thinkers, Samuel Morton and others, they supported the polygenic theory, right? See, you can expect this question separately also. It is not, we are not discussing in detail here. I am just telling you the development of physical anthropology, right? You may not find these things in many of the books also, right? But you must have a decent understanding about these things. ठीक है, अगर आ जाएगा तो कैसे लिखना है, you must understand, right? So I believe you have understand that what was the focus here until Paul Broca. The focus was on races, categorization of people into different races, right? After that also, see, this thing in Paul Broca and all, it is happening around 1824 to 1880, right? And it is around 1859 when Paul Broca founded an association, right? He started a laboratory also. He started the training program for anthropologists in France. And you know that this was a landmark year, 1859, right? Related to the publication of The Origin of Species, written by Charles Darwin, right? And after him, there were many developments, right? And there was a book written by Thomas Henry Huxley, Man's Place in Nature, who basically used Darwin's principles to understanding the origin of humans, right? After this book, Man's Place in Nature, Darwin himself wrote another book, The Descent of Man, in 1871, right? So these were some of the developments in physical anthropology which, you know, founded the basis of this discipline. After him, many scholars like Ernest Houghton and his students, they started teaching in Harvard University. So from there the things will become a little bit clearer. So I don't go much in detail into that, right? Our purpose here is to understand just the beginning and development of this discipline, right? Because now after that, we will see that what the people like, when a subject become a discipline to study in any university, at that level, it becomes legitimized and recognized, right? And from there we can leave it. Okay, from there we can leave it, because there are many. After that, contribution is too wide that it is very difficult for us to even cover, right? So what we can say here, what we can see, that in physical anthropology the focus was primarily on the classification of humans into different races, and how that classification was being done on the basis of certain measurements. What were those measurements? Those measurements, I told you, the craniological studies, right, or craniometric studies. That means cranium is this skull, right? इसका measurement लेना, height का measurement लेना, body sizes के measurement लेना. So on the basis of metric studies, the people were being categorized into different races. That was the focus of physical anthropology until now, right? And this trend stayed up to Second World War, right? And we know that after Second World War, there was a disenchantment against the racism, right? And that is why in 1948 there was a declaration by UNESCO also against racism, right? So that was a time when the racial discrimination was rejected, and so does the expansion of this. But this is not the only thing that led to widening of horizons or scope of anthropology, or you can say physical anthropology. Rather, here there were other developments, right? The person that I have just named, Houghton, right, and his students like Shapiro and Kuhn, and their student, that was Sherwood Washburn. Sherwood Washburn was the key person. Just remember this name, others you can forget, other than Paul Broca. Okay, so just try to see this. Name, Sherwood Washburn. So before his advent to the scene, right, the anthropology was, physical anthropology was classical physical anthropology, you can say, or that you can say simply physical anthropology, where the focus was primarily categorization of humans into races. It may study some anatomical differences, or anthropometric measurements can be taken. Okay, so here the focus of classical physical anthropology was the study of human races on the basis of anatomical differences or anthropometric differences, or there can be study of different bodily adaptations, right, diseases. That is it. This was the focus. Sherwood Washburn says that this is not sufficient. We need an interdisciplinary approach. We need interdisciplinary approach to understand humans in much deeper sense, right? In much better way. We need to have an interdisciplinary approach in which we should learn from other disciplines like primatology, like genetics, serology, demographic studies, right, and all. So learning from them, using their tools and techniques and methods, we can make anthropology much wide, much deep and holistic. That was his focus, right? So basically he made anthropology wider in scope. So here you can talk about, in this development, in historical development, that how the scope of anthropology has widened from limited scope to the expanded scope. You can also talk the shift from physical to biological anthropology, right? There is a shift from physical to biological anthropology, because here we are talking about genetics, we are talking about serology or serogenetics, we are talking about primatology, disease, and all these things, right? Their tools and techniques are used for better understanding humans, right? So basically the new physical anthropology, or this expansion from physical anthropology to biological anthropology, or from classical physical anthropology to new physical anthropology, there is the widening of scope, and this widening of scope incorporates the learning from other disciplines, right? If I ask you how the scope of classical physical anthropology differs from the new physical anthropology, or how the scope of physical anthropology differs from biological anthropology, you can write on that, right? It has a limited scope, focusing only on races, anatomical differences, and anthropometric measurements, whereas the scope here is much more interdisciplinary, including other disciplines and their learnings from biology, physiology, genetics, serology, even recombinant DNA technology, and all these things, DNA fingerprinting, everything is included here. Okay, so I believe you understand that. So this shift from classical physical anthropology to new physical anthropology, right? Before World War II, after World War II. The main person is Sherwood Washburn. Okay, this is physical anthropology and this is biological anthropology. You can say that this is the shift that you can better understand here, right? So first we have discussed what is the definition, then we have discussed the history and development, and within the history and development we have discussed about the scope also, right? We have discussed about the scope of physical anthropology, right? Now if I ask you that what does the current field of the study, because now we are not segregating between physical and biological anthropology, we are talking interchangeably again, because differences we have made out, but our purpose is not to see both separately all the time, right? In general we will see both of them one and the same. Okay, so what does this include? Its scope include now combinedly, so that you can have a much deeper view. Okay, so what is the current fields of study, or you can say scope of physical or biological anthropology? We are using it interchangeably. Okay, so it studies paleoanthropology, what is paleoanthropology? Paleo means which is dealing with the fossils, right? Extinct fossils, extinct organisms, right? And anthropology is the holistic study of humans. So it is dealing with the extinct human species. It is dealing with extinct human species, that makes the subject matter, or it comes under the scope of Paleoanthropology. No, not only paleoanthropology, rather paleoprimatology. Paleoprimatology. The extinct primates, right? Extinct primates, proconsuls, and other ancestors to our present day apes are also studied under this field. You can also think about the osteology. Osteology is the study of bones, the comparative anatomy, right? That you were comparative anatomical differences that you were studying, that can be done through osteology. Then human genetics, right? Study of heredity and inheritance among humans. How does the traits are transmitted from the parental generation to the next generation? How does various hereditary diseases emerged, chromosomal disorders emerged? That is also the part of study or the scope of this, right? We also study human growth and development. Right? What are the factors responsible for this human growth and development, whether it is only just biology or the environmental factors too. Then we also studies human ecology, right? Environmental adaptations of humans. You know that the people living near the poles are larger in size, bigger, bulky in size, right? And the people living in near the poles like Eskimos, they have shorter fingers, small nose, small ears, whatever appendages they have, that is very small. On the other hand, I just gave you an example yesterday itself about the Maasai tribe of Kenya, where the people are very tall, they have long legs, long fingers, long ears, right? Why does it happen? Why does people living near the poles have small nose, small ears and small fingers? On the other hand, people living near the tropics, they have longer fingers. What is the reason behind it? So the reason is basically, it is explained using two laws, Bergman's law and Allen's law, that helps us understand the human adaptations, right? So Bergman's law says that people living in, or the organisms living in, hypothermic organisms living in the colder regions are larger in size, right? And Allen's law says that people live in the hot, humid areas have longer extremities, because longer the extremities, larger is the surface area, and larger is the surface area, better is the heat dissipation, right? Heat dissipation, heat का निकलना आसान हो जाता है. That means they can survive better with longer appendages in the hot areas. But if the same people are living in the cold regions, right, they will face cold. That is why people living in the colder regions, they have smaller extremities, so that they can conserve more and more heat within themselves and fight the cold outside. Bergman's law says about size, and it is talking about the size of extremities. There is another law, Gloger's law. Gloger's law says that the skin color is an adaptation, right? The skin color is fair in high latitude regions, Why? Because if they have more melanin in their skin, then they may face deficiency of vitamin D, which is very, very essential for their bones, teeth, right, and other vital functions of the body. But if melanin is deficient in the tropical regions, then people may develop cancer, because the ultraviolet radiations are very intense in the tropical regions. So the dark skin color and the presence of more melanin in the tropical regions is an adaptation to protect themselves from the intense UV rays, whereas the fairer skin in the colder regions is an adaptation so that those people can receive more and more ultraviolet radiation, which can be useful in production of vitamin D in their body, right. So this is what I say, human ecology. Now, not only ecology, forensics is also, forensic anthropology, which is responsible for solving many crimes. CID देखते होंगे आप बचपन में, ACP प्रदुमन, right? Okay, not only this, even demography, right? Demographic studies, demographic transition, all these things also part of this. Even medical anthropology, the types of diseases present in a particular population is also under the scope of this discipline, right. So this is what we can say, we can talk about the scope of this field of physical anthropology. Okay. Now, after the scope, let me tell you something about the methods used in physical anthropology. What are the various methods used? Okay, what are the various methods used in physical anthropology or biological anthropology? So here we use anthropometric analysis, anthropometric analysis means the measurement of different body parts, ठीक है. एंथ्रोपोमेट्री का यूज आप किनेंथ्रोपोमेट्री में भी कर सकते हो, एंथ्रोपोलॉजी ऑफ स्पोर्ट्स, एंड यू कैन डू दिस यूज इन एर्गोनॉमिक्स. आप सभी लोग कंप्यूटर और मोबाइल फोन यूज करते हो, द वे यू यूज इट, राइट. इवन इफ समवन हैविंग द थिक फिंगर्स, मोटी फिंगर जिसकी होंगी वो भी इजीली यूज कर पाता है, एंड पतली फिंगर वाला भी यूज कर पाता है, राइट. The design of helmet, the design of office space, chair, car chair, shoes, and all these things that comes under this. Not only this, on the basis of anthropometric data, people can be categorized into different racial groups on the basis of size of head, face to head ratio, right, nasal index. So we can categorize. So anthropometric analysis is one. Using this anthropometric data, we can also study the growth and development. ठीक है, हम क्या बोलते हैं, stunting, wasting and all these things. How we know about that? That is using this anthropometric analysis, right. We can also do blood group studies or serological studies. Serology is the study of blood, serum से आया word, right. So blood group analysis, right. You can also think about the genetic analysis. or chromosomal analysis. Okay, gene mapping can be done to understand that which gene is defective and which is not. Gene mapping. Okay, so all these things, even recombinant DNA therapy and recombinant DNA technology can be used to identify which gene is defective and not, right? It is used also in therapy also, ठीक है, but identification में भी use कर सकते हो आप इसको. So all these things that I am talking about here, we can use them as methods in physical anthropology. This is not all, but here I am just giving you few. When we come to the separate subject, right, separately when we will discuss, you will know more and more about all these methods, right, that is twin studies and all these pedigree analysis. You can write all of these, whatever you can recall here, but since I have already told you, because the first chapter is the beginning, but you will understand in the last, right? You will understand this in the last because it has the crux for everything. But if I don't tell you about this, you will not get the entire picture of anthropology. That is the purpose of giving and spending more and more time in the first 3 days, right? Pedigree analysis, twin studies, family study, okay, other things you can just think of. These are the methods, aminosynthesis. Now, what are the applications? Because applications, or you can say relevance, is the most important part of any theory, or any theoretical discipline. So what are the applications, right? So you can say in the medicine, physical anthropology can be used in disease diagnosis, right, treatment, even development of vaccines, isn't it? So it can be used in medicine, it can be used in better understanding the growth and development, do I need to give the examples of these? How in medicine it can be useful? See, in diagnosis, you know that this RT-PCR test, reverse transcription polymerase chain reaction, right? So this diagnosis for COVID, all of you might have, gone through this testing at least, and if not all, most of you might have already gone through this disease also, right? So diagnosis में use आ रहा है. Similarly, there are other diagnostic methods. Treatment. In treatment, you can say that simple treatments, tailor-made, customized drugs can be developed, right, in pharmacogenetics. ये आप थोड़ा बाद में समझेंगे, pharmacogenetics and all. I'm not burdening you with these terminologies. So treatment में आप simply gene therapy, you might have heard, all of you. ठीक है? Genetic वाली बात कर लेते हैं, right? Gene therapy. आजकल WhatsApp पे बहुत चल रहा है, 16 करोड़ का एक इंजेक्शन लगता है जिससे कि एक डिजीज ठीक हो जाती है, right? So gene therapy, vaccines that we are developing, right? So these vaccines also are developed using the genetic technologies. So there physical anthropology is useful, right? Growth and development, it's understanding, right, how growth and development is taking place. What are the factors responsible for it? We can do it, right? Physical anthropology can be used to counter racism also. Right? How? Because we say that humans are categorized into various races. Some are fair colored, some are pale colored, some are dark colored. Some have different shape of head and forehead, nose, teeth size, jaw size, height, and all these factors, hair color and all. But do you think that we differs genetically? Is there any genetic differences among different races? So among these genetic differences, there can be question, because the scholars have identified that one race, say Caucasoid, or you can say Europeans, Negroid, you can say Africans, Mongoloids, you can talk about Chinese, Japanese race, right? So scholar says that these three races, they differ only 6% from one another. The differences from 1, 2 and 3 is only just 6%. But 94% of the variation, the 94% differences are within one race. These are 94% different from within the people living. All the Negroid, they may differ 94%, but the difference between one race and the other is just 6%, right? So this is, on this basis of this genetic study, this genetic knowledge, we can counter that racism is a myth, right? No race is superior or inferior, right? No race is superior or inferior. We can prove it using the mental capability or the IQ, right? Frank Boas have countered racism using the IQ study of approximately 13,000 or I think 19,000 students in USA. So he countered that. Okay, so racism can be countered. You know that अभी स्पोर्ट्स चल रहे हैं ओलंपिक्स में, राइट? द करोर्स ऑफ मनी इज शावरिंग ओवर नीरज चोपड़ा, राइट? सो इन एंथ्रोपोमेट्री, हाउ वी कैन सेलेक्ट बेस्ट athlete, how we can train them, what are the kinds of equipments they need, all of these comes under this branch of knowledge, this branch of anthropology, anthropometry. The forensic anthropology can be used to solve the crimes. It can be used to prove the paternity or establish the paternity, who is who child, right? किसका father कौन, mother कौन, right? Using this forensic analysis, we can identify the dead bodies from a major disaster also, right? The vaccines can be developed that we have already discussed. So all these things, all these can be used. Now, you have seen recently, people have visited space, right? The Branson and Bezos, both of them have, taken people to the space. They have visited the edge of Earth's atmosphere, edge of space. So they were wearing certain types of suits. How those suits can be designed, that also can be studied, right? And how they can be made using the anthropometric analysis, ergonomics, right? So that is also can be an use of physical anthropology. We'll assemble in some time and we'll discuss further about other branches, socio-cultural anthropology and all, right? So we'll take a break of 10 minutes. Thank you. Okay, so let us start with the second branch, that is socio cultural anthropology. See, again, as we have done that in physical anthropology, that there was classical anthropology and there was classical physical anthropology and new physical anthropology. Here also there was something like limited scope and expanded scope. Before going into that, let us first understand why these two words. Earlier, before this was a combined branch, right? The credit for combining this social anthropology and cultural anthropology, which were the two different branches, social anthropology and cultural anthropology. These were combined together by Alfred Kroeber. He pushed this for the very first time in 1948 after World War II, and in 1953 through a symposium, international symposium of socio-cultural anthropologists, both were merged together. Right. Now, this social anthropology as a discipline, it emerged in Britain, right? And the main patterns, main important scholars associated with social anthropology was James Frazer was the earliest one, who wrote a very famous book, Golden Bough. He was a critical evolutionist who believed in evolution of cultures, evolution of societies, right? And he says that the societies evolved from magic-based society to religion-based society to the science-based society. In this way, there will be evolution of the societies, right? He wrote a book, The Golden Bough. Right? He was the first and the foremost proponent of social anthropology. Later on, it was popularized by Radcliffe Brown. Right? Before it became a separate discipline, social anthropology in British universities was taught under psychology. साइकोलॉजी के अंडर पढ़ाई जाती थी ये. Later on, the credit for separating this and making it a separate discipline as social anthropology goes to Radcliffe Brown, right? Okay, so this is social anthropology. Cultural anthropology, on the other hand, it developed in America. Right? It developed in America, but the first cultural anthropologist is considered as your E.B. Tylor, who was British classical evolutionist. Right? Who was British classical evolutionist. He gave the first most comprehensive definition of culture. Right? He says that the culture is the composite whole. Culture and civilization, taken in its widest sense, is a composite whole, consists of arts, morals, knowledge, laws, customs, traditions and habits acquired by men as the member of society. Right? So this was his definition of culture. Later on, culture anthropology was developed in America under the patronage of French Boas and his followers like Ruth Benedict, Alfred Kroeber, and others. Right. So both of them developed in separate continents. Both have different aims to study. The focus here was culture, the focus here was society. and social institutions, right? Focus here was society and social institutions, right? Radcliffe Brown was interested in making it more and more scientific, right? Generalizing discipline. Here the focus was mainly on description. So here you will come to understand two basic terms that were basically dealt in studying the cultural anthropology, that is ethnology and ethnography, right? Ethnos means people, logos means scientific study, and ethno and graphos means description, right? We will take this separately, we will not jumble up everything here, right? It's just for your say that ethnology is the science, it's a description, right? So ethnology is the comparative study of two or more cultures, and with the aim to generalize, to theorize, to make scientific laws. Here the purpose is description, holistic description of all traits present in a particular culture, right? Now, you understood what is social anthropology, what is cultural anthropology, and when they merged together. Who basically pushed this merger post World War II? Alfred Kroeber, and it was done in 1953 at an international symposium of social anthropologists, social and cultural anthropologists, and that is where both of them have merged. Right. Now, this is just, you can say, it shows you how they emerged and how they combined. So you can understand here the history and development of socio-cultural anthropology. Right. Now, before writing this history and development of socio-cultural anthropology, you may need to write a definition also, right? If I tell you the definition in the beginning, before that, you may not be able to make sense. Now, I just want to ask you to think about the definition. How you can define the socio-cultural anthropology? So it is the scientific or holistic study of society, various social institutions, and culture, traditions, customs, arts, morals, etc. over time and space. That is what you can define this. Then in the history and development you can talk like this, right? And if you want to go further in detail, let me give you that detail too, but I don't think that you require that much detailing, because here if you write in this way, that will be much better, right? Post that, after that, you can talk about the theoretical developments in socio-cultural anthropology. Whatever theories which are given and written in your syllabus, 6th unit of your syllabus, anthropological thoughts, just after that, just start with that, right? All the theories you can talk. When I was talking about James Frazer, he was classical evolutionist. After classical evolutionists, there was historical particularism and diffusionism. After that, functionalism, and so on and so forth. That is how this sub-branch of anthropology have evolved. So that you will understand much later when we will cover the 6th unit, right? So for that, I don't want to go in detail into that subject, that topic of theories, right? So I believe you have understood this distinction between the two and how they were merged together. So first thing, you have to write the definition. Since both were separate, so you can write the general definition, right? And then the history and development I have told you. And naturally, if I talk to you about the scope of this discipline, now you can tell me very easily. Because if you talk about the scope of social anthropology, if you talk about the scope of cultural anthropology, you can talk about that, right? Now, within the scope, there is one thing that you must understand, right? In the scope, you must understand that the scope of anthropology or socio-cultural anthropology is not as wide, as global, as universalistic as today, right? It was not the same in the past. It has expanded over the time. New knowledge was created. New theoretical dimensions were emerged out, sprouted out. And more dimensions were started opening, right? So the scope of this branch, I am taking collectively, I am not segregating, although you may study separately the limited scope of social anthropology, limited scope of cultural anthropology, and their widened or the expanded scope. I don't want to go into that, right? And neither I would recommend you to go, right? Because it is not that necessary. Now, initially, as I have mentioned yesterday, what Amber and Amber has to say, the statement, this book says, these scholars says that the scope of anthropology was not global and universalistic in the past as it is today. Okay. Similarly, on the scope, many scholars made their contribution, and let me discuss on the scope that scope in the past, or you can say limited scope in the past, was because James Fraser, the social anthropologist from Britain, classical evolutionist from Britain, who talks that all cultures, all societies were evolved in a unilinear fashion, right? So what it says, that scope of social anthropology covers beliefs, rituals, way of life, thought patterns of primitive people, right? So James Fraser, who wrote the book Golden Bough, he says that it is restricted to the primitive people, or you can say simple societies, Adivashis, tribals, right? So James Fraser यहाँ पे बोलते हैं. Evans Pritchard, similarly, he also says he shifted his stance twice. Initially he says, जब उनकी अंडरस्टैंडिंग थोड़ी कम थी, तो वो क्या कहते हैं, that it is related to the study of primitive people, primitive societies. It is limited to the study of primitive societies. Later on, he shifted his stance, right? That we will talk later. So initially he says that the scope is limited to the primitive people, their way of life, right? Their sociological study. He goes on to say that socio-cultural anthropology is the branch of sociological studies, right? Relating to only primitive people. But this does not give us whole picture, right? And that is why we must see the expanded scope. Right? So in this expanded scope, what we can see? We can see here the holism, universalism, right? Holism and universalism is the key here, right? Holism, that means it studies all aspects, right? universalism means it studies the people at all levels of development. Okay, and here the contribution of George Foster. George Foster, he says that the scope of, expanded scope of socio-cultural anthropology can be seen through various themes, right? There are many themes through which we can understand the scope of socio-cultural anthropology. First theme, he says, the study of modern adaptations of primitive societies. Okay? The study of modern adaptation of primitive societies. Second, he is talking about the primitive societies first and how they are adapted. Second, the peasant societies. The peasant societies, agriculturalists you can say, right, societies. Then the modern society, the civilized world that we live in, okay, the civilized or modernized society. Fourth, specific institutions like marriage, economic organization, political organization within this civilized society, right? Institutions, particular institution like marriage, family, etc. And now the scope is not limited to these four. Rather, now what it is studying, human rights, war, peace, freedom, gender relations, right? All these factors, even ethnic problems, international relations, all these things are being studied. So you can say the scope was limited earlier, later on it became holistic and universalistic. You can quote these scholars to further substantiate, and finally you can write these factors quoting George Foster or without quoting him to show what truly socio-cultural anthropology now engages in, right? Now, basically, after that, let me tell you in brief what this scope include, right? थोड़ा सा specific में जाते हैं. Yes, this is general that you have to write. Now let me in little bit detail. What can this scope include? Right? अगर मैं बोल रहा हूँ limited scope, तो in limited scope what it is studying? Limited scope में limit क्या थी? That it is restricted to primitive people. Right? So what of these primitive people? Right? Their social institutions like family, marriage, economic organization, political organization, religion, customs, folk tales, music, isn't it? All these things were being studied. After that, in expanded scope, it is not restricted to the primitive people. Rather, primitive people, peasants, right? And you can say modern world, modern society, all these specific institutions. Here we are talking about this primitive people. Now in primitive or simple societies, tribal societies, you may not find much difference between economic organization, political organization, religion. सब कुछ घर के लेवल पे हो रहा है, फैमिली के लेवल पे हो रहा है, because all the people living in that group or community are kins. They are linked through one or the other relationship. But in modern world, that is not so, right? You and me may not be related, but we know each other. But in simple societies, primitive societies, all of the people are related by one relation or the other, right? So it is much more complex here. We have a separate state machinery to enforce law and order, but the law and order in primitive societies is maintained by the kin group. भाई बहन रिश्तेदार ही उनका लॉ एंड ऑर्डर मेंटेन करते हैं, राइट? इकोनॉमिक ऑर्गेनाइजेशन, डिवीजन ऑफ वर्क हियर इन मॉडर्न सोसाइटी. आई एम अ डॉक्टर, यू मे बी सम अदर प्रोफेशनल, right? Someone will maybe other profession, right? So in this way, these different professions can be seen, right? So these are diffracted, but here everything is done at the household level, right? So here we are studying the specific institutions. Moreover, the modern world wars, right? Freedom, peace, gender equality, transgender rights, all these things are also the subject matter of study that comes under the scope of socio-cultural anthropology. So you can see in that way that how the scope of anthropology have widened over the time, right? We are taking this together. I'm not further dividing it, right? Now, next thing comes that what are the various methods? What are the various methods used in socio-cultural anthropology? The methods, see, methods of data collection, methods of, you can say, study, how you study people, how you study a particular institution, how you study a particular group, right? So the first and the foremost method and important is field work. Just try to remember what Herkovitz has to say. Herkovitz says that field is the laboratory of the anthropologist. Herkovitz is the same American anthropologist. Make sure I will remind you again and again many of the anthropologists which are necessary for you to write in the exam. So just keep paying heed to my words and you will remember all the necessary anthropologists by the end of these classes after 3 months, right? So field work through participant observation. Now what is participant observation? I have told you. Participant observation. Participant means participation in the group life, right? Participation in the community life or the group life. So anthropologists go to a community, to a village, stay with them, learn their language, right? Participate in their rituals, customs, उन्हीं की तरह पूजा करता है, उन्हीं की तरह खाना खाता है, उन्हीं के जैसे घर में रहता है, उन्हीं के साथ सीखता है, and then he or she observes. He may take note in the notebook, microphones or any other device and which is available, cameras and all, right? So that is participant observation. The second method, this field work method, is basically ethnographic method. Now what is ethnography? Ethnography is the description. Ethnos means people and graphos means description. So it is the holistic description. Holistic description of the people or a group. Now, description of what? Description of all traits, whether it is the racial trait, which race this group belong to, social and cultural traits, right? All the social and cultural traits, their language, their customs, type of family, traditions, etc. Description of all, right? The purpose is only and only description here, right? The purpose is not to make laws. Yesterday I gave you, in the assignment, I gave you 2 questions and their model answers. So the second question was ethnography and ethnology, right? So what is ethnology here now? Ethnology is the comparative study. Ethnology is the comparative study of 2 or more cultures in order to make generalizations or laws. Here ethnography का purpose था सिर्फ description करना. Suppose you take ethnography of culture 1, ethnography of culture 2, ethnography of culture 3, E1, E2 and E3, and by studying these 3 ethnographies, you come at a conclusion and you start making laws. So this is ethnological analysis, right? Aim here is to make laws. Ethnography is ideographic, and ideographic means descriptive. Ethnology is nomothetic, that means generalizing, right? You can read that portion, that text that I have given you yesterday, you make more sense out of it, right? When it comes to it, I will discuss it again, don't worry. Okay, so second method is ethnography, right? Now, comparative study analysis. So ethnology is comparative analysis, right? Or you can say ethnographic study, ethnological study also, ethnological analysis. In comparative analysis also, there is comparison of 1 or 2 cultures, right? This employs emic and etic approach. Emic and etic approach, which I have explained earlier, right? Emic is the native's perspective, insider's perspective, what the people live in that particular culture think and behave. Etic is what people, what outsiders think about them. कोई एक ट्राइब ले लेते हैं, सपोज संथल ट्राइब, हाउ दे परसीव देयर वर्ल्ड, संथल्स, दैट इज देयर पर्सपेक्टिव, एमिक पर्सपेक्टिव, एंड व्हाट वी थिंक अबाउट द संथल्स इज द एटिक पर्सपेक्टिव, राइट? अबाउट देयर फूड हैबिट, देयर ड्रेसिंग हैबिट, देयर वे ऑफ लिविंग, राइट? So that is emic and etic. This is historical also method, right? Evans Pritchard, the disciple of Radcliffe Brown and Malinowski, so he says that anthropology, or especially socio-cultural anthropology, is historiography, right? Historical study. Even Frank Powers, the father of American anthropology, he believed in historical method, that without studying the history of a particular culture, you cannot understand about the origin and migration of traits, origin and migration of people. So that is another method, historical method, right? Then it also studies that synchronic and diachronic methods, synchronic and diachronic. I have elaborated that. At the same time, and the study of past, right? So all these can be discussed under the methods of study, right? Now I'm erasing this so that we can move on to the next section of this socio-cultural anthropology, and that is the relevance part. What is the relevance of socio-cultural anthropology? Okay, relevance, significance, or how you can employ the theories and practices, right? Suppose you can understand what kind of cultural practices are being practiced, what kind of social institutions are there, right? What kind of social and cultural beliefs are there, right? And if you want to make some developmental changes, if you want to engineer change, right? If you want to engineer change, you want something instrumental for the holistic development of India, Indian economy as whole. You cannot leave out the 8.6% of Indian population, tribal population. You cannot leave out a quarter of Indian population which is poor, right? If you want to uplift, elevate the situation of poor, you must understand their problems in a holistic manner. And the socio-cultural anthropology not only studies the economic system, rather associated socio-cultural beliefs and religious beliefs. There is one society, one community, Malay, which was studied by Dr. L.P. Vidyarthi, very famous Indian anthropologist. He observed that this Malay Paharia of Chhattisgarh, they do not plow the land. They do not plow the fields. And why they do not plow their field? Because they have their belief that if they plow the land, then it is like tearing the breast of Mother Earth, right? Plowing will be like tearing the breast of Mother Earth. So that is why they do not plow their land. But if they do not plow their land, that means they practice shifting agriculture. They cut down the forest. Now this type of subsistence agricultural practice hardly have any yield. The yield is very low, right? And this low yield is not sufficient for their food requirements or other needs, right? So that means they live in poverty, in deprivation because of their own beliefs. Suppose they practice agriculture with modern means, their economy could have improved, right? So here you can understand that society or economic systems, they are integrated whole. The religious practices are influencing the beliefs, influencing the economic system, right? So basically, if you want to engineer change, if you want to develop a society, so the understanding of their social and cultural practices becomes necessary. So this branch of knowledge, this branch of anthropology can be very, very instrumental in social welfare and developmental planning, right? So this can be very useful in social welfare and developmental planning, right? Okay, what are the other applications? See, I told you about cultural relativism. And what is cultural relativism? Cultural relativism is a belief that all cultures and their cultural practices are equally valid. So if someone is eating beef, someone is practicing cousin marriage, someone is doing any other thing, right? Their practices, their beliefs are equally valid. They are not inferior to any other culture. This practice, this idea promotes tolerance, right? This promotes tolerance among the people, right? So this is another area of application, promotion of peace and tolerance through awareness generation, right? Promotion of economic development we have discussed already. Promotion of tolerance is another area. And if there is tolerance, there will be peace. And if there is peace, there is more development, right? and this peace and development will bring prosperity for all, right? And this prosperity will further promotes tolerance, peace and development. So this becomes a virtuous cycle, right? This becomes a virtuous cycle. Now, not only this, by understanding their cultural beliefs on social practices, the developmental administrators can focus on the bottom-up approach. We can shift to bottom-up developmental approach rather than the top-down approach. We all know that the top-down approach, where the policies are made at the central level and they were asked to implement at the local level, they were not successful, right? And our developmental planners are focusing on bottom-up planning, where people are involved in the developmental process. So here, if we know about them, if we know about their cultural practices, their social beliefs, naturally we can implement the bottom-up planning methods much easily. Right? So here, what social cultural anthropology can be useful? In the conclusion you can write, see, anthropologists are specialists of society and culture, right? They specialized in the knowledge of the society and culture, whereas generalists, IAS जो आप बनने वाले हैं, आप लोग, you are generalists, right? So if we combine both of them, suppose you take anthropology as an optional and you go to the field, you can contribute more. This is one scenario. The second scenario is, if you are an IAS officer, you may or may not have studied anthropology, you are one, and there is a specialist, anthropologist. If you combine both, right, you take help of that specialist in using your generalist knowledge, it will be much useful, right? So in conclusion you can write that this socio-cultural anthropology, right, the knowledge of anthropologists combined with a generalistic approach can be very useful for the upliftment of marginalized and vulnerable section of the society. So that you can use in the final line of your answer, right? So this is all for today from my side, and in the next class we will discuss further about the rest branches, three more branches, right? Archaeological anthropology, linguistic anthropology and applied anthropology, right? We are moving slowly. The reason is I want you to understand each and every detail, okay? And please do write the assignment. Try to write even after hearing that, right? Because if you write on a daily basis, I can assure you that you are climbing the stairs in a right manner, right? You are moving steadily and slowly towards your goal. It doesn't matter, somebody say that you sit and write the complete paper, it doesn't make a difference initially, because Usain Bolt did not run in 9 seconds and something, 9.78 seconds in the very first go. He trained himself. He might have trained in a different manner, right? वो practice तब आएगी when your muscles are fully toned, right, and functional. Your mental muscles, your conceptual muscles are fully trained. Then you can run a full marathon or a full, simulated test. Before that, keep practicing on a daily basis. That will be more effective, right? Because you learn on a daily basis. You improve on a daily basis. Your mind think on the knowledge that you gain from the newspapers, from the books and for other resources. So do write on a daily basis. If you face difficulty, start diary writing on a daily basis. That will help you to develop language, that will help you to develop the thinking also, right? So thank you. Take care.